The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is nothing short of a masterpiece. Released in 2017, it ended a dark era for Nintendo that began with the Wii U and kicked off a new and potentially the most successful era with the Nintendo Switch. Coming out to near total critical acclaim, Breath of the Wild swept that year's award circuit, with the exception of the Teen Choice Awards, which gave Game of the Year to the original Overwatch. Rest in peace. It is, without a doubt, a must-play for every Nintendo Switch owner. So why did I wait over 6 years to play it? Hi, my name is Zach, but you can call me Tilted, and I'm a retro game enthusiast who's found myself in a rut for years of going back to familiar games over and over, stunting my expansion into new games and hindering me from appreciating new and exciting experiences. But that all ends now. I've been streaming my first playthrough of The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild here on YouTube, and this video is going to take us through some of the things I loved, some of my frustrations, and some of the bigger moments of my adventure as we get to the bottom of what makes this game a masterpiece. As I opened up the game for the first time, I was immediately hit with a powerful cutscene that really sets the stage for the urgency of the situation Hyrule finds itself in, and after finding some clothes, I head outside where I was met with a breathtaking view of the ruined landscape of Hyrule, proving the urgency for Link's return to be true. Even in its tattered state, the natural landscape around the kingdom is absolutely stunning and invites you to explore every nook and cranny it has to offer. Exploration is a huge part of the game, and the beauty of every corner, from the snowy peak of Mount Lanayru to the harsh sands of the Gerudo Desert, really incentivize you to look everywhere for the next shrine or the next secret to be found. The towers dotted around Hyrule aided in exploration greatly. They are large points of interest that are fairly easy to spot and give a vantage point once you reach the top. They were relatively limited, which prevented them from feeling like a slog, and the fun puzzles around scaling some made me look forward to scaling the next one rather than dreading it. However, the sights weren't the only thing that drew me into my adventure into Hyrule. The soundtrack had a tune for every occasion and set the tone for every situation I found myself in. Whether that was a sense of playfulness in seeing children play as I strolled into my first town, getting my adrenaline pumping while taking on a powerful boss, or even feeling my heart drop as a guardian locked onto me as I tried to get my unregistered horse to safety. The music was just as important to express what was happening in the world around me, and I think it added an extra level to every mundane climb up a cliffside, or taking cooking from a standard crafting mechanic to one of my favorite parts of the game just because I love the little jingle associated with it. But for real, can we talk about how much of a banger the cooking song is? It made every moment feel like part of the grand adventure it was, and not just something I had to do to get to the next part of the story. Exploration is only one pillar in which Breath of the Wild is built upon. Growth was another huge part of my journey, in both learning how the world around me works, as well as stat growth and equipment enhancements. My first big lesson in how the world works was trying to figure out how to cook. One of the mandatory shrines needed to leave the starting area is through a large section of cold, mountainous terrain. It set everything in front of me to cook cold-resistant food, pepper plants, the cooking pot, and even a big fire to activate the cooking pot. I found the required actions needed to actually cook the recipe a little obtuse. Having to open the menu and hold the ingredients and throw them into the pot was a little bit of a roundabout way to get the desired action. I think a menu you opened by activating the pot could have been more effective in teaching new or inexperienced players how to use the cooking mechanic, as it wasn't until my stream chat guided me through how to cook that I got it figured out. Though, after this small setback, cooking became extremely valuable to our journey, as it's one of only a few ways to regain health or get other temporary stat buffs to things like defense or stamina. I also wish you could have a cookbook for recipes you have successfully cooked previously in the game. I found myself cooking the same few recipes throughout the game because they were good enough to get me by and easy enough to remember. Another big point of personal growth was in combat. One of the big talking points I heard before starting Breath of the Wild was that combat was similar to Dark Souls, but once I got into my first few fights, I was a little disappointed. It felt nothing like the Souls combat I'm accustomed to, and it definitely showed. It felt like I wasn't strong enough to take down even the most basic enemies, and chose to avoid combat as much as possible. Once I really put in the work to learn the basics of combat and how specific enemy types move and attack, combat became much more strategic and compelling. Even towards the end, I was taking on the Guardians with ease because I figured out how to deflect their lasers back at them. Combat is oftentimes the most important part to get right, and I think Breath of the Wild really hit the nail on the head. But now I think it's time we talk about some things I think missed the mark. My first big issue was with the weapon durability. I know this opinion is a relatively popular one, but the weapons simply don't last long enough. It just seems unnecessary to have everything be so fragile and have no way to repair them. I understand they wanted to promote using a wide array of weapons, but when most of them you find are lower level enemy weapons or underpowered loot in the shrines, it feels more like a hindrance than an effective tool to explore combat. I feel this could have been solved a couple of different ways. To explain, I want to leave Hyrule for just a moment and enter the kingdom of Lordran and talk about Dark Souls a bit more. Dark Souls has a weapon durability system, but has checks and balances to make interacting with it less brutal than it could have been. First, there are blacksmiths scattered around the map to buy and repair weapons, both of which I feel like could have been implemented into Breath of the Wild with ease. I think blacksmiths could have been added to villages or outposts scattered around Hyrule to purchase standard weapons from and repair the ones you currently have. Villages already have armor shops, and the fairy fountains are scattered around to help you upgrade things you purchase or find, and I think these could have been added for weapons as well. Dark Souls also has a repair box that you can use in tandem with resources you find as you traverse the world to fix broken weapons and armor without the aid of an NPC. I think this could have been implemented perfectly into Breath of the Wild. It fits well with the theme of exploration and discovery, as gathering resources is already a huge part of the game. Using the minerals you mine for something other than just to sell, and being able to keep a cool weapon you've grown attached to seems like the perfect storm. This is personally what I would prefer, because it upholds the vision of the game while providing a large quality of life feature that would have made some of the cooler weapons stand out more. Unfortunately, there isn't a way to save our favorite weapons, and it only gets worse when you take into consideration the weather. Weather is a constant factor for what you're able to do and when you can do it, and it's almost never for the better. Getting stuck in a lightning storm is a brutal endeavor that is met with certain death if all metal items you have equipped aren't removed. This really stifles the options you have when it comes to what you wear, the weapon you use, the shield you protect yourself with, and even your bow. This requires you to essentially carry a second lightning-proof set of equipment, taking your options that were already limited due to the durability issues down even further. This would be fine if the lightning wasn't a near constant occurrence. At times, I'd have to fast travel to multiple locations just to avoid dealing with it. The lightning was accompanied by the rain, which has its own set of problems that hindered progression and exploration as well. Climbing is nearly impossible when it rains, and when Hyrule is comprised largely of vast mountains and towering cliffsides, it makes it incredibly difficult to traverse the landscape and to get where you're trying to go. The rain can also make it hard to be places when you need to be there, because it puts out all bonfires, and you can't create new ones without cover of some sort, even if you have a magic sword or arrow with flames literally bursting out of them to ignite the wood pile. This can make waiting for specific timed events take even longer than necessary, and can really slow down the pace of an activity or quest you're trying to accomplish. Now, my last problem is definitely not as severe as the previous ones, but I thought I'd still mention it. And that's the usefulness of horses. I like the taming and registering aspect of obtaining the horses, though I didn't know about this registering aspect of the process until it was too late. Rest in peace, Captain Underpants. You were a true friend till the end. I just found that after unlocking a decent amount of fast travel points, the horses quickly lost their value as a transportation method. I think this could have been solved if they had done something similar to Skyrim. That being, when you fast travel, your horse travels with you. I found myself frequently fast traveling to the nearest point and running where I need to go while my horses just kind of hung out on the other side of the map being forgotten about. I loved my horses during my time with them, but using them became so inconvenient that I quit using them and severed the connection I had with them until the very end of the game. So, you may be sitting here thinking, wow, this guy sure has a lot of complaints for a game he's calling a masterpiece. And you'd be valid in saying that. But I bring these up because even with all that said, the story and characters sucked me in, and I became so invested in what was going to happen that those complaints melted away. And I think that's the big draw here. Everything from the lives of those who are just trying to survive the aftermath of this great calamity, to the glimpses we get from the times before Ganon's reign of terror over Hyrule from the memories we collect along the way. These were what was most important to me. I spent dozens of hours exploring every corner of Hyrule, but it doesn't mean anything if the crisis we're destined to avert wasn't as compelling as it was, and I think that's what makes it really special. The thing I find most special when I look back at my playthrough was the quest to reclaim control of the 4 divine beasts in the 4 corners of Hyrule. I cannot describe how cool these 4 mechanical behemoths are, each taking the form of a different animal and harnessing the power of a different element. These beasts were each controlled by their own champion, and they specifically grabbed me emotionally, even though their screen time was relatively short. Their impact on me was an incredibly lasting one. I want to take some time and go through each divine beast, and explain what it was like for me as I made my way through each one of them, and my thoughts on each champion whose spirit I rescued from the Blights, which killed them 100 years prior. Vah Ruda was first, and it was awe-inspiring when I saw it for the first time. A massive mechanical elephant who, once you approach, lashes out, hurling large chunks of ice at you. After navigating through the ice and disabling the waterfalls on the outside, I made my way in, and this is where the real fun begins. All of the puzzles were themed around water, and using Vah Ruda's large elephant trunk to manipulate the flow to gain access to all of the terminals that needed activated to regain control of the beast. This was incredibly cool, and pretty tricky at points, leaving me stumped and having to leave and re-enter to try to gain a fresh perspective. Once we activated all of the terminals, it was time to take on Water Blight Ganon, a phantom of Calamity Ganon, and avenge our fallen friend Mipha. Mipha was an incredibly selfless and kind Zora, and my favorite of the champions, who was killed by Calamity Ganon. This didn't go as planned. Whether it was because I was woefully underleveled, or my weapons weren't strong enough, I struggled with this boss. Taking about a half an hour and several attempts, this was the most trouble I'd have with any of the major bosses, and I was extremely happy to get past it. After defeating Waterblight and freeing Mipha's spirit, we made our way to the Rito village to take on our next beast, Vah Meadow. Vah Meadow takes the form of a large bird, big enough to use the mountain Rito village is built upon as a perch when not mid-flight. Entering Vah Meadow required use of one of my favorite mechanics in the whole game. When mid-air, you can draw your bow and give a kind of bullet time effect, slowing down time to place more accurate shots. Using big gusts of wind to navigate our paraglider, we got to use the bullet time effect to shoot out sentries stationed on the corners of the beast. Once inside, we were able to change the flight angle of the beast to move to new areas to activate terminals and unlock chests hidden within. When I got down to my last section before having to face Windblight Ganon, I really needed to think outside the box. There was an open window, and I figured out that I needed to fly out that window and through another window on the other side, and this blew me away. The level design within this beast was some of the best in the whole game. Maybe it's just because I love paragliding, but I had a ton of fun with this one. The fun didn't end when we finished with the terminals inside the beast, because our fight with Windblight Ganon would take us to the roof of the beast, and this is where it really started to get good. Windblight Ganon has a big laser cannon, Mega Man style, which we had to bob and weave around, but Va Meadow has us covered with giant air vents we could use to launch ourselves in the air with. This gave us the opportunity to once again use our bullet time ability to hone into our foes' weak points and added another dimension to our ability to dodge attacks. After taking Windblight down, we freed the spirit of Revali, a cocky anti-hero type that really reminds me of the Ryan Reynolds version of Deadpool or Vegeta from Dragon Ball Z. He's kind of a jerk, but you can't help but love him. Once freed, Revali bestowed a power onto us which we could use to create big gusts of wind to carry our paraglider upwards. All of the champions give us a different power, but his was by far the best. Mipha gave us essentially an extra life, which was useful in tougher fights, but Revali's Gale was such a game changer when it came to exploring the rest of the game. I think if I were to go back and do it all again, I'd take on this beast first, just to have this power a little longer. After freeing Revali, we headed into the sands of the Gerudo Desert to take on the most challenging of the beasts, Va Niboris. Everything about this beast was a large spike in difficulty, and after some research post-playthrough, it became very apparent why. While the choice in the order you complete the beasts is completely up to you, there is definitely a suggested order in which to do them. Va Niboris is generally done last, so I got it a little earlier than intended, and this definitely showed. After sneaking into Gerudo Town and speaking to their leader, they agreed to help me with the power of the Thunder Helm. Having a safe zone produced by the helm while trying to shoot the giant mechanical camel's feet to disable it sounds good in theory, but having to do it all on a seal-powered wakeboard upped the threat of being blasted with lightning exponentially. Keeping the seal where I needed it to be while also trying to shoot my bow was the first time since the Water Blight fight that I really felt hard stuck without a way forward. But eventually, with some risky maneuvering, we got the job done. Once inside Va Niboris was a labyrinth of moving parts, equipped with 3 large rotating drums that needed to be moved around to change the current of electricity. It seemed like every time I moved one piece, it opened a new path and closed others. I was constantly backtracking, trying to figure out if I missed something, and I started feeling like there couldn't possibly be an inch of that place I had missed. The complexity of this beast really made me overcomplicate some of the puzzles, and I really needed to look at them on a more basic level to solve them. Sometimes trying to play 4D chess when the game wants to play checkers can make something that seems intimidating even more complicated. Intimidating was a theme while going through Va Niboris, and the fight with Thunderblight Ganon was no different. This fight had been talked up in chat for a while before I finally met him, and once I did get face to face with it, it was no secret why. With lightning quick speed and electric powers to disarm me, I still feel like I survived this fight on sheer luck. In most cases, I couldn't get an opportunity to pick up my dropped equipment and just rolled with what I still had left. Dodging the electric stakes in the second phase of the fight, and only getting flurry rush opportunities when I spammed the dodge button, all with my adrenaline pumping harder than during any other challenge so far. It was a miracle we came out victorious on our first try. With our unlikely victory, we freed the spirit of Champion Urbosa, an incredibly strong and stoic Gerudo woman and a fan favorite in my stream chat. They were caught arguing about whose mom she is or isn't, with multiple people claiming her for themselves. She granted us the power of Urbosa's Fury, a powered up charged attack that, while I forgot was even available to me at times, came in incredibly clutch in others. And with 3 of the 4 beasts down, we set our sights on Death Mountain, the scariest location in the game for me personally. Death Mountain is home to the Gorons, a species who eat rocks and are seemingly impervious to the heat produced by the active volcano they call home. Link, unfortunately, is not, requiring special armor and weapons that don't immediately burst into flames. After obtaining the necessary equipment for our spirit-freeing, Ganon-slaying job, we met up with Yunobo, the grandson of the fallen champion Daruk. Yunobo has inherited Daruk's ability to shield himself with some kind of magic force field. Yunobo joins us up the mountain to disable Va Rudania. How are we gonna do that, you may be asking? Well, shooting shielded up Yunobo out of several cannons, obviously. This was one of the more charming pre-entry tasks, just because of how silly it was. Escorting him to the cannons and avoiding the security drones on the way to each cannon was tricky, and we had to avoid some magma blobs launched at us for getting caught, but shooting our friend out of a cannon at a big ol' robot lizard on the side of a volcano never got old. I made my way to Va Rudania, who rested in the mouth of Mount Death, and was met by pitch darkness once inside. Finding my way around by torchlight was harder than I'd like to admit, but once I got the map for the beast, it was a cakewalk from there. Va Rudania was meant to be done much earlier, and I could tell. Only having 2 available positions, while the past couple beasts had several, we got through to most of the terminals fairly quickly, and Fireblight Ganon even quicker. At this point in the game, we had received the Master Sword, whose main ability is that it gets a power boost around the Guardians and Ganons. Fireblight was definitely supposed to be faced before having it. I shredded through it in a minute or 2, with little regard to its attacks or abilities. Only its big fire shield and firebomb attack that require parrying were an issue. Otherwise, I just ran in and smashed it, freeing Daruk, a hardy and protective Goron, and gaining Daruk's protection, a shield power of my own. After all 4 divine beasts were freed from Ganon's control, and the champion spirits were ready to help defeat Calamity Ganon, we made our way to Hyrule Castle. And holy cow, the road up to the castle walls and the castle itself were an absolute gauntlet. There were twists and turns in and out of the destroyed castle, and fun secrets and things to discover around every corner. It really was a microcosm of the entire exploration and discovery found in the rest of the game. The music was again a high point, going from a remix of the theme song while on the outside of the castle to a remix of Zelda's Lullaby on the inside of it. This was the climax of everything we had worked for, and you could feel it. You could also feel the ever-present evil that had infected the castle, that was Ganon's army, specifically the Guardians, who were around every corner and oftentimes in multiples, trying to blast lasers at me. Luckily, at this point, I had figured out how to use my shield to parry these lasers, but the durability of my shield just wasn't going to cut it. I knew I was going to need something better to get through, and my chat knew just what I was looking for. In the jail section of the castle was a powerful shield that would take me to and through Calamity Ganon, the Hylian shield. It was no cakewalk to get there either. I had to go through waves of enemies just to get to the chamber holding the shield, And once we arrived there, we had to take out a Stalnox, an undead version of a giant one-eyed creature that gave me trouble earlier in the playthrough. But we got through him and claimed the shield for ourselves. With the help of the shield and Daruk's protection, sheltering us from Guardian lasers, we made our way up to Ganon for a battle to determine the future of Hyrule. The fight began with a cutscene of all the champions we spent the whole game saving, attacking Ganon with their divine beasts that were now back under their control. Their simultaneous attack cut his total health in half, making it a much more manageable fight. Ganon had abilities from all 4 of the Blight Ganons we had previously faced, plus the laser ability of the Guardians. I had come prepared with ancient arrows and my newly acquired Hylian shield, so it was an exciting fight, but it was far from a challenging one. I landed the final blow and let out a victorious cry as I had taken down Ganon and beat the game. Or so I thought. The real Phase 2 was about to start when Ganon morphed into this giant, disgusting boar-like creature, and we received a new bow made to take him out one final time. Our horse was there to meet us, to ride around this massive threat and work with Zelda to create and target weak points to set the princess free and end Ganon's reign of terror once and for all. Once I was done, I felt such a sense of relief and a satisfying calmness took over me. The ending cutscene showed Link being reconnected with the princess, the spirits of the champions finally being laid to rest, and Hyrule start to rebuild. This was the closest a game had gotten to bringing a tear to my eye. I felt such a weight come off of the character's shoulders, and it was such a rewarding way to end the game. Before the last fight, I was sad there wasn't really a post-game, but with the way it ended, I wouldn't want to do anything to disturb that feeling I had. This is why I feel the way I do about this game. The way it can evoke such strong emotions. The freedom you feel exploring the open landscape, the nervousness when you come up against a strong boss, or the bliss you feel coming from the characters when it's all said and done. Sure, I had some issues with the mechanics, but at the end of the day, none of that really mattered when I got the rush of emotion when the credits started to roll. So, I want to end this video the way it began, and that's with this one simple statement. The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild truly is a masterpiece.